Yeah, you had a question, Sue?
Yes, Robin kind of touched on it for himself, but I was wanting to ask you, having grown up from the cradle with MacDonald, whether there was a time in your life where he became more personal for you rather than just being something that your parents had provided in the environment you grew up in.
Nothing specifically comes to mind in that sense. No specific moment, but there was definitely. I was just talking to Mark about remembering it. Some of the earliest stories I remember. The earliest story I remember of McDonald's was Sir Gibby, and at first it was just a good story. Gibby was a little kid. I was a little kid. It was fun, and all that. And gradually there became more of an awareness of the depth of. For me, it was mostly manifested in the depth of McDonald's characters as I got older. Were just, profound people and good people, and so no specific moment, but just gradually through the characters, really, it became much more personal to me.
That progression, actually this is a little bit tangent, but I think I thought of it, and it's interesting, although I don't know that we want to follow it. We could follow it for hours, but MacDonald often characterizes salvation just exactly like what Gregory just said, that in his characters, it rarely is a moment, it's a gradually deepening awareness. And exactly what he just said about his awareness of MacDonald is how MacDonald characterizes our deepening awareness of who God is and his influence and so forth. Maybe salvation is not the right word to attach to that. And yet MacDonald even does talk about salvation in that way as a gradual, lifetime, ongoing process.
And an interesting, while we're on the subject of his characters and how that affected me at a young age, I think really those were early role models for me. My role models growing up in the 80s were not the pop culture people of the 80s. They were Sir Gibby and Robert Falconer and, Donald Grant, and those were my early role models. And so how could that not have affected me growing up? I mean, that's you can't do much better than that.
But what you said about growing awareness makes me think of the fantasies and his journey through fairyland and how that brought C.S. Lewis to Christ.
Yeah.
So different different things speak to different people at different levels. And I'm fortunate enough that my dad, I share the MacDonald connection with my dad, but not my wife. And it's not something that you can force, but I'm hoping at some point to have that same connection with my children. And just, I'm wondering from your perspective, are there any, I don't know how I want to say it, I don't want to force it on my kids, but I want to
be able to enjoy them initially just as great stories, especially the Curdy books are great ones to start with. Children, Princess and Goblin, Princess and Curdy, some of his shorter fantasies, and like what's that one called where the princess doesn't have any gravity and she keeps going up? Yeah, that's My Princess. And if you just how my introduction to MacDonald was just having my parents read them out loud. My mother read the Curdy books, Dad read the novels, and they're just fun stories. And I think that's something that all children can identify with.
We spend a lot of time on the couch reading. Hours.
How old are your children?
I have two daughters. One is 2.5, and the other is about 6 weeks.
Oh, that's lots of time. This is going to be a good daddy's fun.
Well, we've done a set of 4 young reader, children's editions, but obviously it's still a while before those. And I don't think those were out when you were young.
When did you
On the same trip. And he had been to Cullen the year before, and he had, from the bluff up above, had seen what he thought was the preacher's cave that's in the story. So he dropped the boys and me, you were boys then, off of the bluff, and we walked down, and he went and parked in
We
Cullen.
can almost probably see it from the front picture of Writer's Life where I dropped you off.
And then he then came back along the beach to meet us, and they quickly realized that what he pointed out to as the cave was not the cave. They found the cave. So it would happen to be Father's Day, and they were just wild with excitement and running along the beach to meet him, to tell them that they found the cave.
Just wild-eyed, they just running toward me down the beach, just like
They were 10 and 10 and 8.
the runners in Chariots of Fire.
Which book is that in?
So you went then.
Do you mean the Mad Laird's Cage? What are you
Yeah.
saying that? Okay, because you said Preacher's Cage and I didn't
Well,
get it.
it's called the Preacher's Cave now because there are revivals held in it.
Ah.
But had been.
I mean, what is in the story is actually true. One of our good friends was saved in the Preacher's Cave. Actually, the lady that lives in the house where George MacDonald wrote part of Malcolm.
The ruined castle, is that there too?
Oh,
It
yeah.
is. Finlitter Castle is there. Laura and I and a little German boy walked to it 2 years ago.
It'd be fun to do a trip over it, all of us, huh?
Uh,
We did think of maybe having the MacDonald Retreat in Cullen in 2020.
Sign me up.
but this is the last one.
And the introduction to universal reconciliation.
Does it have to be both? Or I thought we could just do the introduction.
Well,
Not and or it's
I
both.
think it's both. Yeah.
Okay,
So,
yeah.
unfortunately, yeah. But sit back. There's plenty of time to talk about it afterwards, or
And all. And I wanted to do that. Oh, can you hand me a book? And so I just had, I think it's chapter 14. I just wanted to really address it head on. So chapter 3 is called The Big Age. Just head on. Hell. In other words, okay, so I have to ask you, are you a universalist? See, that's the kind of way George MacDonald just didn't. He discussed it in theological terms, but here we're two modern people in early 2000s America in an evangelical church talking about universalism and hell, and that's what I wanted to do. And so, of course, it comes up and they start talking about it, and other people are listening, overhearing, because it's just too hot to handle, and people wander in and drift in, and the discussion starts. And in any discussion, I'm sure you've all been in them and been on both sides of the fence, it's just really controversial. Is death the end, and you're saved or you're unsaved. It's black or white, sheep or goats, and that's that. And George MacDonald is often accused or considered or called a universalist. But universalism, I call it cotton candy universalism. It's the term universalism is really inaccurate because what it implies in the minds of most evangelical Christians is nothing matters, everybody's going to go to heaven, there's no hell, and there's no reckoning, there's no judgment, so it's all okay. God's just too good and too loving to ever send anybody to heaven. And that's sort of cotton candy universalism. George MacDonald's view, which I really discuss at length in George MacDonald and the Late Great Hell Debate, one of my clever topics. George MacDonald uses the term, there is a very ghastly hell. He totally believes in hell. And the view that George MacDonald was a cotton candy universalist and did not believe in hell is just not true at all. But MacDonald redefined the nature of hell and said in Robert Falconer and David Odegaard, hell is God's, not the devil's. Hell is God's final workshop for what doesn't get done here. And it will be awful because it will probe to the very depths of self and all of that. It's the final refining fire of Malachi. Malachi's purifying furnace for the perfection of gold in those who are burned clean. That's MacDonald's view, that the consuming fire is a fire that burns clean. It's a completely revolutionary view of a purposeful, redemptive, purifying hellfire. And many of his sermons and his writings hint at that. But you have to know what you're reading. You have to know what you're looking for. It can be very vague. So that's kind of the view that MacDonald held. Whether the great question is, did MacDonald believe that in the end everybody would be saved? I can't say that I would have to say I don't know. I don't know.
But would you agree the last farthing is the closest to an answer to that you would find in MacDonald, his sermon, The Last Farthing?
Probably. And C.S. Lewis in The Great Divorce, in the end, a lot of people take the bus back down to hell. And C.S. Lewis is on record as really basically indicating that he does not believe that everybody will be saved in the end. Anyway, longer than you asked for, sorry. But the Cappuccino Club gets a group of very diverse, modern, not just evangelicals, but I tried to put everybody in it, from Amish and Lutheran and Catholic to evangelicals, the works. And they're kind of thrust together, and they're all bring all their preconceptions about these doctrines together, and that's the book. And they discuss, and so that's the thumbnail. That wasn't exactly the thumbnail. But
No, I think that answers the question of what this whole view is. So, what we're